One of the more frustrating things about being a sports fan, a player or a coach, is when everything is going well or a team's outlook and forecast looks great based on their roster, and all of a sudden your team suffers an unexpected injury that changes the whole trajectory of the season, or even the long-term future for that matter. And as a Bulls fan, we know this all too well, as our franchise was completely upended when Derrick Rose tore his ACL in the 2012 playoffs, and the team never recovered as a result. The team, given the age of the roster, the culture they had established, was on pace to bring a championship back to Chicago. I fully do believe that. And even after Rose was out for an entire season, when he came back, the thought was, well, we would hopefully make another run at it. But the same thing happened. Rose suffered another season-ending injury, tearing his meniscus, and of course he was never the same player after that. More recently, it seems like the Bulls are constantly struggling to keep their players healthy, and I know this applies to a lot of teams. Players are always getting injured, and there are setbacks for every team, but as a Bulls fan, it's always heightened when it's your own team that you're focusing on. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. I hope you're all doing well. Now, as I'm sure you are all aware by now, on Tuesday it was announced that Wendell Carter Jr. Suffered a right quad contusion that had initially sidelined him for 3 straight games, was now upgraded to being more serious than expected, and he will now miss at least 4 weeks. He'll be reevaluated in 4 weeks, so he likely will miss the entire month of February. Now, let me be clear, Wendell is not a franchise player like Rose was, and his injuries that he's sustained over his short career so far obviously have been nowhere close to as serious as what Rose went through. So I'm not comparing the severity of losing Rose to the same as Wendell, but rather I want to talk about a little bit of the concerns and patterns I see with the frequency to which he's been getting injured at such a young age. So this marks the 3rd injury for Wendell that has sidelined him for a significant period of time in his career. In his rookie season, he looked great to start out his career for a 19-year-old big man, and then injured his thumb, which caused him to miss 35 games. The following season, he started to look promising in his sophomore year, but then he missed a total of 22 games from an ankle sprain. And then, of course, he'll be missing at least 18 games if you count the past 3 that he's missed to go along with the 15 games in February that he'll likely be missing, making it a total of 75 missed games from Wendell due to injury, a little over 30% of his total available games, and he's just the age of 21. Now, not all of it is Wendell's fault. I mean, really, most injuries are out of players' control unless they're just being careless or reckless in what they do off the court. So I really do feel for Wendell, because if you caught his most recent interview after the injury was announced, you can tell he's really frustrated that he just can't seem to catch a break. And Wendell started off the season, pretty cold. If you remember, he was struggling on both ends of the floor, but most recently, leading up to his injury, he was really starting to make strides in the right direction. So to see another setback like this, similar to his first 2 seasons, has got to be tough for him as a player. And keep in mind, he's due for a possible extension on his rookie scale contract, which is coming up this offseason, similar to what Markkanen, his situation was this past offseason. So I'm sure this injury has been even harder to deal with for him, because this was the year he really needed to show up and prove he can stay healthy and earn a contract extension going into the offseason. Now, here are the issues I see with Wendell's injury woes, because like I said, this is his 3rd injury in just 3 years that has sidelined him for a significant period of time. Now, I did a little research, and if you look back at the history of players who suffered 2 or more major injuries for the most part in their first 3 seasons or before the age of 22, they are likely to remain injury-prone players for the rest of their careers and never reach their true potential. So guys like Greg Oden, Sam Bowie, Andrew Bynum, Kwame Brown, Jabari Parker. You could even throw Derrick Rose into that mix, although he started getting injured after the age of 22. But what do all of these other guys, other than Derrick Rose, have in common? They're all big men, and all big men that had a lot of promise, but just could not stay healthy, and their careers suffered as a result, some of them not even staying in the league for all that long because of it. I know some of it depends on the player because some guys don't have the same work ethic as others in trying to recover from said injuries. I mean, take a look at Andrew Bynum as an example. The guy just stopped caring about the game of basketball after he was traded to the Sixers, and really before that he wasn't that into the game. So while I want to say we shouldn't be too concerned about Wendell and his injuries and that it's too soon to give up on him, I even mentioned that in one of my mailbag questions that, you know, it wouldn't be a smart move to trade Wendell at this point because it's a bit too reactionary. On top of that, his trade value has just gone down. But the more that I think about it, even if his trade value has gone down, it could go down even further or be non-existent if he ends up following the trend that some of these past big men who have always remained injury prone throughout their careers, if he follows that similar trajectory. Now, with all that being said, I do still think the Bulls should hold on to Wendell, see how he recovers from this most recent injury, and if he can finish out the year strong, see if they can come to an agreement or an extension, and if he really does progress, or doesn't progress, I guess I should say, or even regress after coming back from the injury, then they could look to move him via a trade, or they let him become a restricted free agent, give him one more year to prove his worth, and then let him walk if he doesn't. Now, I said it before in my video on what the Bulls need to do to get back to title contention, and so my ideal trade, if we were to move Wendell, is to trade him, Kobe White, and a first-round pick to the Sixers in exchange for Ben Simmons to give the Bulls an elite playmaker and defender to pair up with Zach LaVine in the backcourt. But in reality, that scenario probably isn't that realistic. So if I had to give a trade for Wendell that I think would be realistic if the Bulls are concerned about his long-term health and the fact that he is kind of more of a power forward than center and really doesn't fit this roster, I do like the idea of trading for a guy like Jackson Hayes, someone who has started off this season a bit slow and struggled a bit, but has showed a lot of promise in his rookie year. And because he's kind of started up the year slow, his trade value might not be as high as well. So it's possible the Bulls could even get potentially a second-round pick from the Pelicans in exchange for this type of deal. He's only 20 years old, so very young. Wendell is a better player as they stand right now, but in the long term, it's questionable again due to Wendell's injury history. Or we could trade him for maybe a more established veteran, which normally I would always say hang on to your young talent and develop them if you're not in win now mode and you're still rebuilding. But because the Bulls have struggled so much on defense and lack that interior strength, and if you take Wendell away, that's going to be even worse, maybe you can make a trade work for a guy like Steven Adams. You might have to throw in a pick to the Pelicans to make that work because Adams is only 27, so it's not like he's on the decline or washed up. He's actually a very valuable player. He's a quality big man that will give you a double-double on most nights and be a real force in defending the paint. So the Bulls would have to sweeten the pot. It could not just be a straight trade for Steven Adams. And since the Pelicans have been struggling and the lineup hasn't quite looked the way that they thought it would in terms of performance, maybe they would want to get a little younger and develop guys further, someone to go with Zion. The challenge here, though, is really for both teams for these trades is that the Pelicans already have Zion Williamson. So for Wendell, it kind of puts him back into a similar situation where he is right now, where he wants to play power forward, but the team already has a starting power forward. So either he would have to come off the bench or play center. Again, it's kind of hard to find a realistic trade partner for Wendell where it makes sense for both sides and presents good value for the Bulls because that's what we care about most anyway. I am curious though, what do you guys think? Leave me some potential trade options for Wendell. Again, I don't think the Bulls should think about moving him just yet. I personally think they should wait for the season to play out, see how he does, see how the team does as a whole before they start reconfiguring the roster. But let me know your thoughts on Wendell and if these trends in his early career injuries concern you. Let me know in the comments, and guys, as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan as I post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will catch you in the next one.